Welcome to today's episode of the Game Use Podcast, brought to you by Resolution Photo Matching. We are always looking to help at Resolution Photo Matching. Anytime you have a game used item you're interested in getting photo matched, just shoot us an email at info@resphotomatching.com, and we will help you out on that side of things, getting things photo matched. Excited to have another episode of the Game Use Podcast here for you today. We're coming out, as you've seen now, on Thursdays, pretty much every Thursday. And we always like to hear from our listeners. So if you've been listening to the show regularly, it's been about 3 months or so now. We'd love to hear from you. Anytime you have any thoughts or feedback on the show, feel free to comment, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're listening, or send us a message on any of our socials or via email. We always love to hear from you and love to hear how everyone's kind of enjoying the podcast so far. So with that, we'll jump into today's episode and introduce today's guest. He is a big-time football collector of NFL football jerseys, has an awesome collection. He is known as Soul Brother Gamers on Instagram and has a big Instagram following where he kind of shows off his collection. Finn Curran is with us today. Finn, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Absolutely. So I want to start out by asking you a little bit about kind of how you got into the collection you've created. What got you into football jerseys, and how did you get into game used collecting in general?
So it was through cards. I feel like cards is kind of the place where the buy-in is realistic for really anybody to start. With a jersey, you're talking a few $100 commitment minimum for anybody. And so I really started through cards. Um, when I started, I didn't know the difference between player worn and game used and all of that. And over time, I slowly figured out the scarcity of game use and that it actually has a real intrinsic rarity to it. So I started really collecting the cards real heavy. I started really pushing it on Instagram. I started that Game Worn Wednesday hashtag. If you're ever on Instagram, you'll see a lot of card collectors will post Game Worn cards on Wednesdays. Um, and then over time, if there was a few people on Instagram, NK Collective is one of them. Who he was a big game worn card collector who started buying jerseys, and I was like, man, I want to start buying the fabric by the foot rather than the square inch.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you started on cards. When you first started collecting cards, was it specifically the game used cards, or did you start kind of smaller and then like kind of were drawn to like game used cards were kind of your favorite there?
Yeah, so I mean, God, when I first started, I bought all sorts of stupid. I remember having like a Josh Rosen player worn glove logo. I don't even think he wore gloves when he played. And it took a couple years of kind of realizing that it's all just kind of gambling tokens, that basically manufactured patches. Um, and that really kind of got me into the game worn, and then seeing the game worn community on Instagram really grow really helped to inspire kind of going more in that direction, to the point where I became kind of militantly anti-player worn or anti-authentic mem.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We've actually obviously most of what we do at Resolution when it comes to photo matching pieces is going to be a full jersey or whatever it is, a full bat or a full helmet. We actually have been able to work on a couple of cards, game used cards in the past, and something where it's like really unique. Like sometimes you'll see like a full letter and
Hmm.
it'll have like various meshal alignment all on that letter or something like that. So we actually have res matched a couple of like game worn cards, but like you say, that's the authentication for those, especially going back a number of years. Um, Sometimes people had a lot of questions about those. I think it's gotten a lot better. Um, but we've actually also had worked on a couple items where actual card manufacturers or people who were providing full game used pieces that were going to be cut up and put into cards. have sent those to us for res matching as well, and we love to see that because then we can authenticate them before the piece gets cut up and put into the cards, and then it's legitimate. But yeah, like you say, it can be sometimes there's been issues there in the past.
Yeah, so, well, I've had tons of success matching Panini products from about 2014 to the modern day. Once you start with that 2014 flawless, and it was a lot easier back in the day. Golden got rid of a lot of their past histories of sales, and you used to actually be able to find a lot more of the jerseys that Panini had bought that were from Golden. And like you said, it's isolating very specific things, Nike swooshes that have a very specific imperfection, or letters that have specific pulls on their tags. And so if you scroll down on my Instagram page, I have probably a dozen or so photo matches from Panini cards, but I've never been able to
Yeah.
find a photo match from any of like the older tops or upper deck. And I know there was that whole JO Sports issue that they had with the card companies where they were kind of saying unknowingly, but they were buying basically large lots of issued jerseys and then putting them into cards as game worn.
Yeah, you hate to hear those kinds of stories, but like I say, I know it did happen at times in the past. I think it has gotten a lot better. I like to think. I still would love to see more card manufacturers either buying photo match pieces or sending them to photo matching. But I obviously have a little bit of a bias there too. So, um, but yeah, no, that's super interesting. So obviously you started with, as you said, I like how you put that. Started with the patches and then decided you'd buy jerseys at larger size by the foot or whatever
Yeah.
it is. So when did you make the jump to acquiring full NFL game worn jerseys?
Like I said, I had seen some people on Instagram post some, and then I started too realizing that once the game worn patch market really started to skyrocket and people started trying really hard to go after these, especially logo pieces, that you could actually buy a lot of these game worn jerseys for similar prices to what like one high end logo patch would cost. So my first jersey I bought was from a guy who's pretty active in the community, Robbie, and it was a Geno Atkins. And it was actually the last tackle of his career, which I thought was cool. And it was like $500, which a lot of times I've seen his shields go for 400 or $500. So it just seemed like a no brainer. And I was like, man, this is really nice. And all of a sudden, I got a closet full of them.
Yeah, no, that's another one that's always kind of blown me away at times too. When the game worn patch card sells for more than the whole jersey.
Yep.
Yeah, the logo man, whatever it is. The other one is especially more on the baseball side. I don't know. You'd have to tell me if they're doing this on NFL, but do they do the debut patches at all in the NFL yet
So players have worn them, but I have not seen them like a card program the way they do with baseball.
with tops? Yeah, but yeah, those debut patches, they're cool. I like them as a card patch, but it blows my mind when like you'll see the debut patches and then you'll see like a actual game worn jersey from the debut game. And I've seen
Yeah.
it at times where the debut patch card sells for more than the whole jersey from that game. I mean, it kind of makes you scratch your head, but hey, credit to these card companies. They're doing a
Yeah.
great job marketing those patches, and
Well,
people
the
love
cards
collecting something like that.
the cards can kind of create a false scarcity. So like for example,
Right.
one of the things I was going to show was I have a pair of Derrick Henry cleats from his 2000-yard season. Um if Panini had chopped them up and put them into cards, it probably would have 5 times its value. But in the game worn football market, cleats aren't quite as valuable. But since there's such a rare patch and such a unique patch style for cards, you end up seeing the shoes sell for more than jersey pieces in cards.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. And yeah, shoes obviously are in some ways you don't see quite as many of them probably in the game worn space as you do jerseys, but they're definitely out there. But yeah, no, it's interesting the transition from the card side to the game use side. Um, so these days, is it still kind of a combination of both? Are you collecting some full jerseys and some game worn cards, or is it pretty much just jerseys now?
I mix it up, and the reality is
Yeah.
I'm an Eagles fan, and it's not cheap to collect game-worn Eagles jerseys. And so for my Eagles collection, oftentimes I have to settle for the square inch rather than the whole jersey. And it allows me to collect a
Mhm.
wider variety of Eagles. But I mean, like I got a bunch of Chargers on my wall because Chargers you can get great players that I loved watching for a great price.
Yeah, no, it's that's always the trade-off. It's just what you're kind of interested in, and a lot of people, yeah, think that you can't get into the full game worn space without spending $1,000. You can get stuff cheaper. It's just a matter of, yeah, maybe not quite as big name of a player, but and so Eagles fan, are you in the Philadelphia area? Did you grow up in Philly? Tell us more there.
So I actually grew up in Hawaii.
Oh,
I
okay.
I became an Eagles fan when I was a little kid. You kind of have to choose. My dad's family. So my great uncle was he was a warden at what was at the time the biggest prison in Philadelphia. And he was murdered by a couple of inmates.
Mm.
And when they built the new prison, they named it after him. So the biggest prison in Philadelphia is named after my uncle. So I always kind of had a lot of family ties to the team and to the city, and I never looked back.
Yeah, boy, that's a crazy story. But as far as, yeah, the Hawaii side, that's tell me a little bit more about that. It's obviously I don't know too much about the game use scene in Hawaii. I know, with Resolution we've had maybe one or two Hawaii clients, not too many.
Uh-huh.
Um, what was it like growing up in Hawaii? And maybe you weren't in the game use scene at that time, but just what was kind of the sports scene like in general? Obviously, you don't have professional teams there. Well, what was it like on the sports side of things growing up in Hawaii?
Well, I was super lucky. So, my childhood basically coincided with the June Jones, Colt Brennan, Timmy Chang era of University of Hawaii football. And so we had season tickets from like 2001 to 2010. Um, so it was really like the heyday and the golden age of Hawaii football. So I got to see basically all of Colt Brennan's home games. Those are all like amazing memories that and I still have kept a lot of like kind of the have cards that I've had I got as a kid that I've had for over 20 years and somehow managed to keep nice and undamaged.
Very cool. And so you started rooting, was it for all Philly teams, from early childhood, or was it, did you mix it up, since you were geographically in a separate area or?
So for baseball, I've always rooted for the Phillies. Also, they had Shane Victorino, who was a Hawaii kid
Yeah.
during that time.
Flying Hawaiian.
Yeah, so it was a lot easier to just kind of make it easy and root for the Phillies and Eagles. Guess I'll root for the Sixers, but I don't have a lot of like emotional attachment. I mean, I remember watching Allen Iverson as a kid, but I haven't watched much basketball in the last decade.
Yeah. And you're not in Hawaii anymore. Are you, or are
No,
you
I'm in the
still?
Bay Area of California.
Okay. Uh-huh. So
Yeah, so mostly
still
Niners
west,
fans.
but, okay. Well, that I don't love, yeah, I don't love to hear. I like your Eagle loyalty better than the Niners being a Seahawks fan.
Yeah,
But
I don't love the Niners fans either. They're pretty arrogant and they spend a whole lot of money on their game worn jerseys as well. Their market is not is not easy to enter.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's just, yeah. We can stay away from the Niners. We'll give you Niners fans a little bit of a break. I know the Seahawks beat up on them pretty good there in the playoffs this year, but so tell me a little bit about where are some places that you like like going to acquire jerseys? Are you doing a lot on kind of the big auction houses, eBay, just kind of as like a, you know, in the in the trenches collector, you're finding stuff and you've only been doing it a couple years. Where are some of the places that you're going to get these pieces? Or are you like trading for them with other collectors on forums or Instagram or anything?
I would say all of the above. So it started with me kind of finding just a couple accounts on Instagram and finding a couple jerseys that way. And then I can't stand Facebook, but unfortunately, I think because jerseys is a bit of an older kind of collector base than cards, you see a lot more activity on Facebook rather than Instagram. But, I think Facebook is a terrible platform for this for buying and selling the jerseys and for, like, those groups, and it's really hard to vet people. You can't kinda get a good read like, Instagram, I can get a good read on what you own and, kind of what your place is in the hobby just by seeing your pictures, consistency of backgrounds. You can tell when somebody actually owns the jerseys or cards, you know? And, Facebook is a lot harder to do that, but unfortunately, it seems like all of the big, groups are on Facebook. So I've gotten a number of jerseys from Facebook, a few from eBay. Obviously, it's never fun paying. Well, in California, it's like 11% sales tax on anything on eBay, so that's never fun. So try to kind of avoid that or the auction houses, but I've bought from Golden before and eBay. But yeah, a lot of times Facebook, Instagram. If I can find someone on there, I'd much rather.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously you do a lot on Instagram, and that's a great tip. I want to ask you some more tips. I love that one that you mentioned where if you see someone has a bunch of different posts and they all have the same background, well, that's probably a piece that they do in fact own because they're taking it themselves. Whereas if it's, maybe it's stuff that they've, seen secondhand or whatever it is. Do you have any other tips for collecting on Instagram, ways to find other collectors, ways to strike up deals via Instagram?
Some of the red flags you'll see are like the legit posts or the not responsible for damaged mail. And usually those are kind of teenagers who aren't quite as trustworthy. Um, for finding gamers, we made a hashtag that's hashtag NFL gamers. A few of us have used. Also, just searching by the hashtag game used, game worn jersey, you can end up kind of finding a lot of different accounts. Like I said, it's smaller than cards. You'll see people with $100,000 in gamers who have 800 followers, and then you'll see a card account that's got a bunch of random
Mhm.
prism parallels and they got 10,000. So
Yeah, no, that's great advice because I think, like you said, a lot of collectors, Facebook is kind of the default. I think Facebook is better set up for groups and like group communication, maybe, but yeah, Instagram, I think, especially amongst the younger generation, is probably a lot more popular overall. And yeah, no, that's interesting. Obviously, you've had success on Instagram. You have a pretty big following. Kind of, how did you get to that point? How did you get those followers, get that kind of audience going, and kind of keep people excited about what you're posting?
um engage with people and kind of make posts that drive engagement. So ask questions, get people's opinion, state your own opinion, say unpopular opinions. Those are all good ways to just, engage with the community. And then the more you engage with other people, the more people are inclined to kind of want to engage back. I'll be honest, I've slowed down a lot in terms of the Instagram. I used to spend a lot more time and post a lot more regularly. And when it's cards too, it's easier to post more regularly as they're cheaper. I might not get a new jersey for a couple months.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. But yeah, well, let's dive a little bit deeper into your collection. I know you have a couple pieces behind you
Yeah,
there, and yeah, do you have some things you can
sure.
show us?
Yeah. So we can start with what's behind me. So I got Melvin Gordon, Keenan Allen powder and Darren Sproles. The Darren Sproles actually has great stats. It's got like 300 all-purpose yards and multiple touchdowns. Um, and Sproles was one of my favorite players. So in my collection, I have a number of Eagles and not Eagles uniform. It's just a much easier way to collect them. They're more accessible. They're cheaper. So yeah, Sproles was always one of my favorite players. The Keenan Allen has pretty good stats too. It's got like 100 yards receiving, and always love the powder blues. And then the Melvin Gordon is pretty indicative of the end of his career. He scored a touchdown and then fumbled a ball at the goal line. But I always loved watching Melvin Gordon, both in college and as a pro.
Yeah, the best of both ends of things there.
Yeah, so I thought it summed up his career well. And then here's what I was mentioning earlier are a pair of Derrick Henry's game used cleats from his 2,000-yard season. And these actually I did find on eBay.
Huh?
They were attached to a fantasy football trophy. Apparently, the NFL had run some sort of sweepstakes
Huh.
where they gave away a fantasy football trophy with a pair of his game used cleats. And so I bought them on eBay. The guy was like, "This trophy is going to be really expensive." It was a massive trophy. And I was like, "Dude, I don't want the trophy. Like, if you can just unscrew the cleats or however they're put in there, like, you can just send the cleats and that's fine." So that's how I ended up with those. And I don't see a lot of stuff from his 2,000-yard season. I don't see a lot of his stuff in general. So that was one I was super excited to add.
What season was that from? I'm curious about that promotion that the NFL ran.
2020. So, yeah, and in his eBay
Okay.
listing, it was a guy who didn't really know what it was he had, and so in his eBay listing, he included some of the like promotional material that went around the whole sweepstakes. But I was able to easily photo match them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The NFL just doing a this cleats and trophy
Yeah,
fantasy football trophy combo. That's a funny way to market it. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that's cool. Yeah,
when it comes to game used and the NFL, they are terrible. Their NFL auction site is horrible. Their pictures are bad. Their photo matches are not even really real photo matches. Like the listings are sometimes incorrect. Their shipping takes forever. I feel like NFL auction has the worst system for distributing game worn material of all the major leagues.
yeah, could get them get it streamlined a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, they could use your
absolutely.
guys' help.
We'll have to check back in with them with yeah, we'll have to check back in with them
And
there.
then this one's probably my favorite piece, and this one is Terrell Suggs. And this one is the reason I love this one so much is I was able to photo match it to the game where he came out in the Bane mask. And I've been able to see that picture. I see that picture online sometimes. And I've also seen pictures of him in the jersey and cards a lot. And it was worn in two games. One game he had like 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, a forced fumble. Like it was one of those games where he had his own YouTube highlight. So between the Bane mask and the YouTube
Mhm.
highlight reel, I've always felt like that was one of my favorite jerseys.
And are there any players that you're kind of watching in the NFL right now, whether it's like young prospects or anyone like that that like is on your radar of like maybe that's what piece you want to get next, what game use piece you're looking for or anything there just as a
Um,
fan?
I've always tried to avoid the hype of the now. I'm always happy to buy a guy who peaked 10 years ago. In fact, I would prefer it that way.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, like obviously there's some Eagles that I would love to pick up from like the most recent Super Bowl squad, but I assume that's going to be about a decade wait before that kind of slows down price wise. And even then, it might not, just because it depends on if the Eagles win more Super Bowls, you know?
Yeah, I always say the same thing. I think current prospects, current stars are really fun. And maybe they can be a little bit more fun because they're current players. You're watching them right now. But unless it's someone who really is one of those, top 10% of star or top prospect that really pans out, um, sometimes those can be good from the investment standpoint, but most of the current players and top prospects aren't gonna, on the investment side, maybe better to wait a
Yeah, it's
few
just a
years.
losing
So
proposition.
I definitely see what you're saying on that
Yeah,
side.
I
Yeah.
would say though soccer has a kind of better availability for that if you're trying to like pick up younger players. I own a few soccer jerseys as well. Of US guys like McKennie and Pulisic. Um and a lot of their stuff is really accessible through the Match Worn Shirt website. And you can pick up, there's some teams that sell just about every game. They'll have like their fresh lineup of stuff, and that's actually a kind of good place where you can buy a lot of the like younger soccer stars.
Yeah. No, that's great. We've been doing more and more soccer lately with resolution, but that is, I gotta say, kind of an interesting combo. I feel like I don't know that many f- football, American football, and international football soccer. The football soccer combo. I feel like you don't see that too
Yeah,
often.
I mean you got Chad Johnson, Ocho. He's a huge proponent of soccer, and I growing up I played
Yeah.
soccer from when I was like 4 to 18. So it was a sport I was always real
Uh-huh.
connected with. But in terms of watching, it was always going to football or baseball games.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just an interesting combo. I feel like at least in the game use world, I can't think of too many people I know that have both NFL and
Yeah,
soccer
I also
jerseys.
collect
So,
Magic the
no, that's
Gathering.
cool. But um
Yeah,
okay. That one might be tougher to
yeah.
photo match, but very cool. Are there any kind of like holy grail pieces or pieces you're kind of like on the hunt for? Maybe it's a favorite player of, 10 or 20 years ago or whatever it is that like you're really kind of looking for your next
Yeah, LaShawn
purchase.
McCoy. Um, LaShawn McCoy is a huge one for
Okay.
me. I own a number of his game worn cards. Like I have shields and game use shields and Nike swooshes and everything, but I've always wanted an actual jersey of his. I used to be in a Jaguars group chat where we used to bicker over whether or not Fred Taylor or LaShawn McCoy was more deserving of being in the Hall of Fame. And so it added a whole nother level of personal um, interest. And yeah, I just LaShawn McCoy is my guy. He's one of those players where I've always loved players where it kind of almost makes you laugh when you see them do something. And LaShawn McCoy had the shiftiness that you would just kind of laugh at the way the defenders would fall down.
Yeah, that reminds me of like the reverse hurdle, that your current Philadelphia Eagle had there. That's kind of the play where you just kind of
Yeah.
chuckle. Yeah.
Also, Fletcher Cox has always been one that I've wanted from the Eagles team. And kind of probably maybe a little more attainable since he's a lineman rather than a running back. I also have a you can see I have three frames behind me. I have the Terrell Suggs I showed you, and then a Chris Long, and then a Fletcher Cox, and you can put the three last names together, and it ends up being pretty funny. I always thought that would be a funny display to put up.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah. Get a little humor
Yeah.
mixed in there.
Yeah, I
No,
had
that's good.
one. I had it before because I had a
Yeah,
Jason Taylor, and so I had Jason Taylor. I have a DeAndre Swift, so I had Taylor Swift Suggs.
that's funny. Yeah. You can't mix the Kelsey jersey in there then.
Yeah.
That'd be some a battle at two ends of the
Yeah, well,
spectrum
and
there.
God, Jason Kelsey jerseys. He's probably up there with Saquon price wise.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, when you have a guy like that that's doing so much outside of just their playing career, he's obviously with new heights and everything. He's gets some celebrity status, bumps up the jersey value that way.
Yeah, and I
So
feel like people don't always kind of take into account like the value of staying relevant outside of the career. People don't kind of think about the fact that like LaShawn McCoy, you still see him almost every day on some sort of clip or short reel or whatever, from some talk show. And it kind of helps to keep these players relevant.
yeah, and even like announcers, I think it's interesting when you have like a John Smoltz, for example, on the baseball side, or a Greg Olson on the football side. You know, fantastic playing careers, but they're going to stay relevant through their announcing. Even kids who maybe never saw them play, or 10, 15 years from now never saw them play. Uh, they know them as the announcer, and they probably increases value a little bit on their
Yeah,
game
for
use
sure. And I
pieces.
mean, I remember Pat McAfee autos would sell for 10, $20, and then I, I remember a couple years ago they started selling for like $200.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's a great example of someone who maybe a few people knew him as a player, but definitely a whole different ballpark now. He's kind of taken over ESPN almost. So it's yeah, he's definitely quite a trajectory. So I want to ask you a little bit too, and I think this is a great topic. I love that you have it. I was looking at your Instagram earlier, and you talk about you really like getting on social media, connecting with other collectors, because at times collecting can be a little bit lonely, a little bit
Yeah.
isolating. Um, and you kind of reference that in your Instagram bio. Talk about kind of maybe let's first talk about kind of what that experience was like for you, before you got on Instagram, if you did any collecting prior to getting online, and kind of the shift that connecting with people on social media created for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it probably saved me from a gambling addiction because when I first started with cards, it was just buying boxes and getting into breaks. And I was almost proud of the fact that every card I owned, I had gambled to acquire. Um, and kind of through that process of getting to know other people, getting to hear other people's opinions, getting that exposure to new information, you're kind of able to form kind of new ideas and realize your mistakes. So it was definitely really helpful in that sense. And, I mean, it's really hard to collect something if you feel like you're the only one that cares about it. So having that platform where other people react, other people have that same emotional reaction to things that you have, that makes you value it more. Um, so I've definitely enjoyed that community aspect of it. And I can't imagine still collecting if it wasn't there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so it's mostly through Instagram. When are you kind of just, because again, Instagram doesn't have groups. Are you just like DMing people when you see they have a cool collection and saying like, you know, hey, would love to talk to you more about it?
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
kind of how
And
you
I
go
mean, you
about it?
just can like a bunch of their pictures and comment, "Hey, that's badass," or "Hey, put out someone
Yeah.
on message, dude, your
Yeah.
collection's super cool. Would you ever consider parting with this or that?" And that's a difference too. Is Facebook, I just get a picture of you and your wife, or you and your kid, or something. And I can't see what you own, or can't get an idea of like, hey, maybe this guy
Yeah.
would part with this. So that's why I've just never enjoyed the kind of nature. Um, of Facebook, and I mean this I just don't like the Facebook algorithm either. It's just a bunch of craziness all the time. I'm like, I don't need to
Yeah.
know what my uncle's posting on some stupid AI bot account, you know? So yeah, it's just I've always enjoyed
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
aspect of Instagram, and you can create group chats on Instagram too. Um which are good ways to share leads to jerseys. And a lot of the big people on Facebook do have some sort of Instagram. They just don't have it. They're just not super involved with the community, maybe the way like my page is designed specifically to be a hobby account.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. And yeah, as far as I love that you just like straight up in your bio on Instagram address that it's important, I think, for game use collectors. Like you say, by nature, it is a very online uh, type thing. And I think it can go in either direction. I know when I first started collecting, now I was a kid, I was in probably seventh grade or something. It was for the first year or two, it was just kind of on my own. I didn't really talk to other people about it until, for me, it was Game Use Forum. Now, this was back, almost 20 years ago now. But, um, and then you could talk to other collectors and learn from each other. And now Instagram's kind of a new way to do that now. where yeah, you can, make it a lot more social of a hobby versus just, going around and looking on your own. And I think that makes it that much more enjoyable. So I love that you kind of have that
You
attitude.
know, and it's funny you mentioned that game used forum because I've been on there before, just for like information seeking. Like there, the one I can specifically remember is some post where it broke down all the different cuts Reebok used to have, from skill to pot belly to oversized, whatever, you know what I mean? And so you'd have, and they had this nice list, and I was like, so I've definitely used Game Use Forum because it's a good source of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was great. I wish it was still, you know, as big as it used to be, but I think it's gotten kind of replaced by various, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, you know, message boards in general are not as popular as they were 15, 20 years ago. So, yeah, I think it's kind of fallen off, but yeah, it was a great resource back in the day. So, I want to ask you also, about kind of where you as kind of again, I think you're just kind of a everyday collector, and I mean that in the best way possible. I think, this is what, a lot of our listeners are. It's not their full-time job necessarily. It's something where it's a hobby. They're passionate about game used items. They're passionate about the sports they collect. And, it's that's kind of what the hobby's all about, I think. Those are the people who are the core of the hobby. I want, from your perspective, tell me a little bit about kind of like what some of your favorite things are about the hobby and what are some of the biggest things that, you think would make the hobby better, or maybe it's not the way it is right now that maybe we as the hobby, as individuals within the hobby could try and do to make it better.
Okay. I mean, right now I would have to say my favorite thing about the game warring hobby in general is that it hasn't been tokenized or kind of commodified as a gambling item. Seems like everything else within any of these spaces has been turned into primarily just a gambling apparatus. And the fact that game use is hard to do that with. And I think that actually prevents it from growing to a wider audience, but it also keeps it to an audience of people who more genuinely care and don't view these items as a conduit to just money.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything that, you wish that we don't have right now on the hobby or in the game use side specifically that you wish we could kind of get to more?
Not sure. Let me think about that one for a second. I do wish, like I said, I do wish there was a some sort of balance between maybe Instagram and Facebook, where there was a better community for more game use collectors to kind of interact and show off their collections and kind of get to know other game use collectors. Um, and it would be cool if some people started setting up at shows. I've never once seen it represented at a card show.
On game use
Yeah,
side, you
I've
mean?
never once seen like a setup at a card show where a guy had a bunch of game used jerseys on the, like hanging behind him or anything. It's only ever
Yeah.
cards.
I think they're out there. Yeah, I think they're out there from time to time, but you're right. The hobby is so card heavy that most of the time when you go to a show, it's gonna be at least 90%, if not more
Yeah.
cards.
Well,
But
and the cards sell
yeah,
easier.
no,
People wouldn't.
absolutely.
I
I
don't.
think
I don't think somebody's gonna buy a booth
yeah,
and hang up a bunch of jerseys and pay that money for the booth, and when they don't really have a realistic way of selling the jerseys. But like I said, I think that's one thing I like about them, because I think most of the people at the card shows are there thinking that they're Warren Buffett and they're making some brilliant investment. Um, so it kind of does keep out
yeah,
a lot of that market, that hype based market.
yeah. No, I totally see what you're saying there. And yeah, it's it maybe is the size of the items too. Obviously, cards are a lot easier to transport to shows for just your average collector. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I like, what you're saying about the monetization, the almost, gamification element, the gambling side of it. Um, it's something to think about because I think, we'll take cards in general, for example, the rare parallels and things like that in the card world that have real, all the different colors, all the different variations. Um, yeah, it is when you're busting over packs now. It's kind of like half half cards, half lottery ticket almost. And I think there's pros and cons to that. I still like
Yeah.
packs. I don't think of packs as a good investment most of the time, but if it's fun, then it's a good thing. But yeah, you're right. The game use side, you can't really do that in the same way. And I agree. I think it's something where you can that makes it unique, and that's one of the good things about it, like you said.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
gambling's tons of fun. That's why I try not to do it. Because I love doing it. It's great fun.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta know how much fun you can balance with the monetary side. But yeah, no, that's super interesting. So, um, well, is there anything as far as, obviously you collect a lot of jerseys. Any other, and you have the cleats, things like that. Do you Is there anything that you think like you'll expand to in the future, whether it be, other types of pieces, or obviously you have some soccer too, or other sports on the horizon, or where do you see your collection going next?
Yeah, I've been kind of more interested too in collecting people from places where I lived, so I saw Max Holloway he wanted to do kind of like the My Cause, My Cleats with his fight gloves. I would love to pick up some sort of match used Max Holloway item. That'd be amazing. Or like Alyssa Liu is from Oakland. She's from right near where I live. Like she would be a cool person to have like an item of. And you imagine those items don't have comps or comparable sales to them because they just don't really exist.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Expand to the fight worn side a little bit. Yeah, fight used, but
Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
if you've ever watched
very
Max
cool.
Holloway, but he seems to know
Well,
a lot about the hobby and collecting, and he seems kind of in tune with what's going
really?
on. Yeah, he knew all about the whole My Cause, My Cleats and NFL auctions and all that stuff.
Huh. Yeah, we'll have to see if we can get him on the show here. It's for our listeners, I've talked about it a little bit, but we are working on it, and I think we will, hopefully, and maybe not the near future, but in the next year ahead, we're looking to get some athletes who also collect on the show. So that's our goal. We're gonna see if we can get some of those types of individual.
Well, I was curious too. How did you get into this?
Yeah. Into like the photo matching side of things.
Yeah, how did you end up starting, or did you start Resolution, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started Resolution back in 2016. So we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary. And yeah, I started collecting game used bats when I was like 12 years old or so. And just kind of learned about the hobby since from that point. And then fast forward, I did a little photo matching kind of casually, kind of on a basically an amateur level. And then after I graduated from college, I was like, well, maybe I'll try launching kind of a full scale business and creating a professional level service. And yeah, it's been 10 years now. So
Nice, yeah, congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Um, but anyway, well, Finn, it's been great having you on the show here. And I want to give a shout out again on Instagram. You are Soul Brother Gamers on Instagram. And we'll keep an eye out for LaShawn McCoy or any of those other guys you're looking for. But Finn, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks to everybody who listened to today's episode of the Game Use Podcast. And keep an eye out for us next Thursday, and we'll see you next time. All right. Goodbye.